All right, so this is your host, DJ Raskoon, and we have three, not one, but three special guests today. So introduce yourself.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so hi, I'm Rhythm Sachdeva. I am representing ISA in this event. We're here to discuss Kashmir from the perspectives of India and Pakistan. I'm here to talk a little bit about how India feels about the situation
And how Pakistan feels about the situation.
Okay, so
I am Chaman Bukhari. I am Vice President of the Pakistani Students Association. This is my only relevant qualification I feel is worth discussing here. And your original question was, sorry, I forgot, why it's important.
There's so many, there's so many issues going on in the world today. So, with people that are listening around the world, give me reason why they should care about this issue.
Well, I think they should care about this issue because it is one of the oldest conflicts in the modern geopolitical sphere. And so from that perspective, if we care about issues that are taking place elsewhere in the world, for example, in Palestine, if we care about issues that are caused by natural disasters, then we should also care about the issue that is taking place in a place that's really not brought into the limelight often, right?
It's never spoken about. It's never given enough attention.
It isn't, and it just feels like it needs to be talked about more often because without talking about it, we will never become aware of it, and if we never become aware, then we will never work towards its resolution, right?
I think it's similar to that thing in the U.S., every time a gun incident happens, people talk about gun control, but there's some politicians, they say, never talk about it, never talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, is it similar like that, where it's a big issue, and there's some people that are never talk about it, and it always happens like that?
I don't know. I feel as if in Pakistan, at least, there's a lot of talk about Kashmir.
Okay.
But I don't suppose that there is a lot of talk about Kashmir in Pakistan as there is in Kashmir itself.
Based on my prior knowledge, I know that Nawaz Sharif, the previous prime minister, and the difference between him and this new prime minister, is there any difference in terms of how they treated this Kashmir matter in their philosophical or just in terms of politics?
And their political...
what did they do differently?
Well, not that I'm aware of. I am not... Look, when we decided to do this talk, it wasn't as if we meant for it to be like a hot debate where we would... India and Pakistan would face off, it's an ISA versus PSA cricket match. It wasn't meant to be that way.
It's meant to be as casual as possible.
Not only casual, but also where we can come to an agreement eventually.
Almost informative even,
That's
I feel
right.
like we were just discussing this before the show, that I feel like even if we're talking about awareness and how little the world is aware, how little are we aware? I feel like I don't know much about what the Pakistani civilian feels about the situation. And I'm assuming he doesn't know much about what the Indian civilian feels about the situation. We're really trying to give it a human perspective to this event because events get so politicized and media usually talks about only the politics behind the situation, but we don't really know what are the people really feeling towards this. Is there more to the story? What can we do about this? Can we come to an agreement? Do the people agree?
So that is why when we were talking before the show, we got a chance to get to know each other's perspective a little better. We decided that it wasn't actually about what the Indian government feels or what the Pakistani government feels.
It's bigger than that.
Not only is it bigger than that, but we have to agree that I am not a representative of the Pakistani government, and she doesn't represent the government of India.
And totally.
Right? It's a
And you know what? I respect that because I think what's missing is we had a conversation about this last week. We always talk about statistics and all that, and you know what? I think what's missing now from the conversation that we have is that human perspective, that story, that moral, that empathy.
Right.
How many times, when we have a conversation like this, it always leads to battles of, this party, that party, this statistic, but we never get to actually listen to the story. We're just talking just for the sake of talking. We're never actually listening.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like in this particular situation, people tend to forget the most important thing, which is the actual Kashmiris who are living in Kashmir. I feel like we don't talk enough about how hard is this on them. We're only talking about what India cares about or what Pakistan cares about. What about being able to live in a country or in an area where you're ridden with curfew, you're scared to go to school, with fear of being killed. There is no freedom to be able to speak your mind. There is no freedom. There are no resources, and people have grown up in curfew. They're brought up in a curfew environment. And the real solution shouldn't be appeasing the political environments of these countries. The real solution should be finding a way that these people can live lives like normal, decent human beings. And I feel like that's what our approach today should be about. Less about, our political aspirations of each other's countries, but more about how do we feel that we can make this better for the humans who are living in this area.
Absolutely
Right,
great point
absolutely.
raised by her, by the way.
Yes.
And I just like to add to that by saying that we should be paying more attention or highlighting the sentiments of the Kashmiris themselves. So what is it that the Kashmiris want? Of course, India wants, okay, so for those of you who don't have an idea of what the conflict is about, I think it's important to sort of go over, to give an overview.
Absolutely.
So Kashmir is a region in the Indian subcontinent, and it's in between Pakistan and in between India, and also a region of China borders it as well.
Really?
That's right. And
Okay.
in fact, China also holds about 30%, if I'm not wrong.
I believe India and China have gone to war over Kashmir.
They have. So it's the region of Kashmir that China holds is called Aksai Chin,
Okay.
right? So, but that's a different topic, right? Maybe when we have a Chinese representative here. But with regards to this, what happened was after the British partition of India in 1947, there were about more than 500 princely states, out of which they were given a choice whether join India or Pakistan or remain independent. So Kashmir eventually joined, eventually joined India, but that's debated. I, being from the Pakistani side, would obviously say
Yes,
that's
you know,
debated.
By the way, just
Right.
out of curiosity, before the 1971 separation, there was no Kashmir, right?
1947 separation.
No, before the separation, there was no Kashmir.
Kashmir has existed.
Kashmir
It still
was
existed.
a land
Yeah.
that always existed. It has
Oh.
been there from the 1800s.
Okay.
That's
So
right.
what he just told you,
Okay.
I was raised with a very different version of this. From
Okay.
what I was aware, was that when the partition happened, exactly, the princely states were given an option whether to stay with Pakistan or to stay with India or to become independent.
Okay.
Now, the then king of Kashmir, it was told to us that he actually chose. Even though it is actually debated that most Kashmiris didn't respect him and he was a very violent leader, at that time he's the one who actually picked that we choose to remain with India, which actually led to several riots, and it led to a lot of violence in Kashmir at that time. Which eventually led to India confronting the UN, like this is a problem, which eventually led to, a part of Kashmir being given to Pakistan for POK. Now, you might have a different version of this, but this is what was taught to us. That once the violence would not stop, the UN was approached by India, and a logical solution at that time was to create a partition, in Kashmir itself, and POK came into being, in which Pakistan occupied Kashmir, in which certain lands where there was more Muslim dominated was actually given to Pakistan.
Okay.
And the rest of it was to remain with India. And India assumed that this would lead to, that the part which remains with India would be independent Kashmir. So I believe that's what the goal was at the point, but it didn't actually lead to that.
So is it?
That's a very interesting thing because so what we can do right now is we can also experience the sort of different viewpoints that we've been brought up with,
Sure.
and so we have a chance to explore that. This viewpoint that I'm about to present, I wasn't
But
actually.
before you, let me just jump in and say, by the way, you were saying about that thing where, was it because as soon as, India assumed that Kashmir was going to be an independent land, and as soon as that didn't happen, is that when the problem happened, or?
No, I don't believe. So this is really debated upon. I can't
Okay.
ensue the facts, but Kashmir was promised a plebiscite.
Okay.
In which they were supposed to actually vote whether they'll be independent or not. Now, India claims that they actually chose not to be independent. Now, a lot of Kashmiris say that we were never actually given that plebiscite in the first place. So
Okay.
now that is something I can't comment on. My government
Okay,
has
that
a
makes
different
sense.
stance on
That
this.
makes sense.
However, with the actual UN involvement was not to do with independence. It was more to do with, should they be part of Pakistan.
That makes
So
sense.
the solution that was coined at that time was to actually make a line and give part of Kashmir to Pakistan.
Okay.
So yeah, that's exactly it, and this actually occurred after, in 1948, the Indian authorities went to the United Nations Security Council and they asked their opinion, and then in response to that, they passed a resolution now known as Resolution 47, in which the United Nations highlighted that there should be a plebiscite which should be taking place within Kashmir. But then there were certain clauses which you had to fulfill, conditions you had to fulfill for there to actually be the undertaking of a plebiscite within Kashmir, which included, for example, the withdrawal of military from both sides, from the Pakistani side and the Indian side, right, which hasn't occurred to this day. And I think it's imperative for both sides.
Would you say it's like a security dilemma? Because
it is, because then both sides are worried about whether or not, or who is actually going to fill that vacuum that's created.
Because it's balanced, like they don't know. They one wants to be overtopped, something like that.
Well, of course, it's a battle over resources.
By the way, because you guys are bringing this up, I want to bring up a similar issue. 2014, okay, between Russia and Ukraine, if you guys remember, there was Russia wanted to annex Ukraine, and the UN condemned that. They said that this is a violation of UN rights. However, Russia was saying that they held a referendum in Ukraine, and they said that 96 or 98% of it wanted to be part of Russia. So again, when Russia, then after it became, Russia, Crimea, and then again, there was discussions of was that legit, or was that
well, that was controversial because it was led by Russia itself. Russia didn't have a precedent set by the United Nations or any guidelines set by the United Nations themselves, right? So the UNSC, the Security Council, did not ask Russia to conduct a so-called referendum there. So if they were to go ahead and do this by themselves, it would raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, and this particular referendum you mentioned has actually been disputed a lot, through by the media, by actual Ukrainian sources, so while I agree with you that the facts state that the Ukrainians were more for pro-Russia, exactly like how he said, the UN didn't actually sanction this, like this was something which they did on their own, and the results have and can be arguably skewed more towards, say,
because
Russia.
they did it on their own, that's why it was a violation.
So if we compare this to what's going on with Kashmir, then I would have to agree that, if India was the same plebiscite situation I told you, I believe if India maintains that the results of the plebiscite were that Kashmiris want to be part of India, there is a possibility that these are maybe skewed results, because this was not something that the UN asked us to do, I think specifically, and this was not something that Pakistan had almost no role in.
What was not something that the UN didn't ask us to do?
So the actual plebiscite, which had been done, from what I understood was when the UN was initially involved, there was not supposed to be a plebiscite to see if Kashmir was going to be free or not. However, it was conducted anyway by my country, because apparently it was it was to prove that, see, Kashmir really doesn't want to, be independent. And the results of this, apparently, were that, that they didn't want to be independent. But if many Kashmiri accounts say that this particular plebiscite never actually took place. So this is something that has been argued in my country for years.
Yeah, so this is a surprise to me as well, because I've searched, or like I wouldn't say I've researched, but I've looked over the many independent sources. For example, BBC I was looking over. So I have a general idea of what Kashmir has gone through, and a plebiscite is not one of those things. Right?
And so this particular, most Indian sources talk about this plebiscite, but like he said, most international sources don't even mention it.
In fact, something interesting. If we were so a plebiscite hasn't taken place, but several or like some sort of legitimate surveys have been conducted, polls within Kashmir. One was cited by Al Jazeera quite recently. And they said that majority of the Kashmiris, they want to be independent instead of rather with Pakistan or with India.
They want to be their own country.
That's right.
Similar to what's happening in Spain, Catalonia.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, I just want to jump in. So you're saying, there's Indian media here, Pakistan media here. Just out of curiosity, is there like a neutral? What's a neutral argument for this?
I suppose the neutral argument, Rhythm, and I think she would agree with me, is to. This is a hard one actually.
Where do these people have a neutral stance?
I think the neutral look. If I were talking as a Pakistani, I'd say. Give it all to Pakistan. And if she was talking as an Indian, she would most likely say, don't allow me to speak for you, by the way. That just, probably she would say what I think is that give it all to India, of course. But
Okay.
I think that we should allow Kashmir or the Kashmiri citizens to have a right to self-determination.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. This is something which I mentioned previously before this event. I was speaking with him, and I was telling him that it would be a really idealistic approach to be able to say publicly that let Kashmir be independent. And while this is actually quite the opposite of having a neutral approach, if Kashmir were say to be an independent entity, that wouldn't make very sense to anyone, because if Kashmir was to be an independent country, then they would need the resources to be able to sustain themselves. For that, they were going to need investment. Now, is India supposed to invest in Kashmir? Or is Pakistan supposed to invest in Kashmir? Because if we let Kashmir be independent, then there's a really high possibility that China will try to take over it.
No.
Okay. No.
We don't have a Facebook Live.
Okay. Now, that was just we were just having a moment. We were just.
No, I was just saying that if Kashmir was an independent entity, then there's a really high possibility that a country like China might want to conquer it. There's a high possibility that India would suspect that Pakistan would want to take over it. India would never trust Pakistan to leave Kashmir alone.
For sure.
Not commenting on Pakistan's
No,
actions.
of course, we understand. Not we, but Pakistan would understand that.
By the way,
those are valid.
speaking of China, have you guys been keeping up with the Rohingya issue?
Yes.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think it was last year in March, and there was a decision in the UN. Everybody, even the US, condemning it. Two
Yeah.
countries were like, no, we still want this to happen. Number one, Russia and China. These two countries were vetoing this bill.
Okay.
They were not recognizing
What was
this
the bill
violence. It was because there was a unanimous decision in the UN. Everybody was recognizing that what's going on in Myanmar, it's atrocious.
Okay.
It's bad.
Mhm.
The Rohingya people, they're being persecuted, the
Mhm,
minority.
mhm.
So again, is there anything similar where in the UN there's been a resolution about Kashmir, and has there been any vetoes by certain
I
countries?
am not sure actually
I
about
believe
resolutions.
this is why we're talking about this, because
Okay.
I don't believe that there is enough talk about Kashmir.
Okay,
that's right.
At least in this circumstance, it has been internationally recognized that these refugees are in need of help, and some international action must be taken. However, I don't actually believe this is the same case with Kashmir. It has been spoken of in the UN in certain cases, but I don't believe that if we speak to the average Canadian or maybe the average anybody, would they know the details of Kashmir? I'm not sure. Because we don't believe that the big reason why we're doing this is to maybe create some self-awareness that this is
Okay.
a really legitimate problem, maybe just as bad as this humanitarian crisis, but not enough people know.
Yeah.
But I just want to highlight since we were talking about the Rohingya issue,
Okay.
and I think a parallel that we could draw
Okay.
between the Rohingya issue and the issue of Kashmir
Okay.
is that there are allegedly, and I say that because I don't speak for anyone. Allegedly, there are human rights abuses taking place in both places.
Both places.
So we know already what's happening in with the Rohingya folks.
Okay.
And in Kashmir, allegedly there are
Same thing has happened.
Indian forces are because the Indian Kashmiri population protests, and then the Indian forces respond with pellet guns, which have left hundreds and hundreds of Kashmiris blinded by the pellets, and not only that, but then many have been imprisoned, and then many have been killed. So that's also something to highlight.
I'm actually glad you brought this up. While I will not testify, because like him allegedly, I do not have any evidence of what the military does in the country, in Kashmir. However, I believe that another side to this coin is that whenever something bad happened in Kashmir, be it a natural disaster, an earthquake, I think floodings, then it's usually the Indian military who ends up saving these civilians and not the Pakistani government. Now,
Okay.
allegedly, I cannot comment for what the Pakistani government does in Kashmir. However, I believe in 2009, there was a lake seriously flooded in Kashmir. Now,
Okay.
do not take my word for it. I don't believe it's 2009. I'm forgetting the date, but somewhere around that era. That a really serious issue happened in Kashmir, and the Indian military helicopters flew, and they actually were saving the civilians, and
In the Indian side of Kashmir.
in the Indian side of Kashmir, in fact, and the thing is that this is what Indian media likes to argue. I do not agree, but I'm not sure if I agree. However, that despite the fact that Kashmiris seem to be very against Indian presence in Kashmir, a lot of their safety and a lot of the self-preservation they receive from militants are actually from the Indian military. Because yes, sometimes when there are suspicions that militants, are going to cause damage, then I think the Indian military takes actions, which are controversial, admittedly, and as far as the whole locking people up thing, that is also a different argument for a different time. But a lot of the safety of the local civilians is actually completely dependent on the Indian military, because that place is infested with all kinds of militants, with people with weapons, and essentially from China as well, because people misunderstand when they look at the map that how close the China is to this location.
I think a parallel could be drawn by saying that whenever a flood occurs in Sindh, which is a province in Pakistan,
Sindh, yeah.
the Pakistani military is there to help the people out. So,
By the way, if I was born in Kashmir, hypothetically speaking, would I be Indian or Pakistani?
You
Or
would
would I
legally be an Indian citizen.
an Indian citizen?
well,
know?
it depends on which side of Kashmir you're
Oh.
born. Because, so Kashmir right now, a war took place in 1948,
Right.
where the Pakistani forces invaded what was then known as Kashmir.
Right.
And where, like, they invaded about halfway, they advanced halfway into it. I don't want to say invade because that
Yeah, yeah,
implies
controversy.
subjectivity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when the United Nations Resolution 47 was passed, which asked for the plebiscite, the place which was under Pakistani control and the place of the area of Kashmir which was under Indian control, they were both respectively called the Indian Kashmir and the Pakistani Kashmir, and in between them was drawn the line of control that exists until today,
Okay.
right? So when you say Kashmir, it is not a simplified region where you could say
it's a lot of
it's
areas.
Indian Kashmir or Pakistani
There's one
Kashmir.
side, that
So
side.
That's
I have
right.
a question.
I got
So
you.
if you're born in the Pakistani version of Kashmir, then would you be a Pakistani citizen?
Absolutely, yes.
Alright, so then
not
it
only
depends then.
not only would you be a Pakistani citizen, but the Kashmiri side of Pakistan, Pakistani side of Kashmir, the Pakistani side of Kashmir also has been granted its own polity by the Pakistani government. So they have their own little system of governance, and they're very, very peaceful folks up there.
Okay.
I've actually been to the Pakistani side
Really?
of Kashmir myself. Yeah,
Uh,
there's a lot of weed growing there. Secret
Wait, wheat or weed?
weed.
Okay,
like
okay.
WEED.
Come on.
I'm really
Just
serious.
messing
about it. I'm not sure if this is talk show appropriate.
Yeah. I just like to add in 2 cents.
Mhm.
So you said how the Kashmir government, it's its own thing, its own
That's
people,
right,
sustainable. Is it like this summer I visited Taiwan, and again I would like to draw this issue because I can see some parallels going on where a lot of people say that it's a province of China, but if you actually go to Taiwan, it's like its own thing.
Yeah.
Is it a country or is it a province?
Yeah.
So again, like, is it?
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so
Is it
you're
a
asking
case
if
of-
that's the same thing?
Is it a case of like is it recognized as a country or a province?
No. So like, because I've been to Kashmir,
Okay.
and there's no debate on the. I've been to the Pakistani side of Kashmir.
Okay.
And so, just in case you thought I was a spy, I am not doing that business.
Oh, yeah.
We'll find out.
The area is like it is legally for Pakistan
Yeah.
a part of the Pakistani territory, and the people of Kashmir within Kashmir, because I have relatives there. That's why I went there. I wasn't there for a
Yeah.
touring purpose, right?
Mhm.
I have relatives there, and they could consider themselves Pakistani. They have Pakistani ID cards, Pakistani passports, right? They hang the Pakistani flowers, the Pakistani flags on their walls and whatnot. So they're as Pakistani as they come. They just have a more autonomous, a relatively more autonomous system.
Do they
of
have their
government.
own type of special flavor food or anything?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. I haven't. The Kashmiri chai is a very famous. You
Oh,
must
yeah?
have heard of it as well. Rhythm.
I actually haven't, so I can't testify for the Pakistani side of Kashmir, but I'm pretty sure, I'm sure he's
Nothing
right.
like
So
food to
I've
unite
heard,
the people, man.
I've
That's
heard
right.
Kashmiri cuisine, and I'm sure Kashmiri chai is extremely popular. However, I think the Indian side of Kashmir, it's exactly the same. It's an Indian passport. However, I have heard that maybe they don't associate themselves as Indian as say maybe other. But the problem with that is, it's more complicated than them being able to travel in the country because they can. It's more about, do they have the resources to do that, and even,
Okay.
so as I mentioned before, it's a volatile area, it's not easy. You need to understand, it's not the life that most Indians live. Like,
Right.
most Indians can able to say that, we have a house, we can go to school, we have a job, we're able to travel, a normal daily routine we can't say the same for Kashmiris who are living in a situation, you know, where there are curfews, you know, where people carry guns.
It's not our problem
You're
to
used to
judge.
the army, you know, you see
Yeah.
the army on a daily basis.
Yeah,
So they
they
live
see
a
that
very
horror
different
every day.
life.
That's
you know?
right. The
They're
army
used
is,
to horror.
is rampant within
Yes.
Kashmir,
Absolutely.
within the Indian administered
Yeah.
Kashmir. It's important to understand that there are, by some figures, 25 soldiers for every single Kashmiri.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, it's
Do they have their
often-
own private property, by the way, or?
Kashmiris?
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure they do. You
They
know,
do?
yeah,
Okay.
it's more than possible to do that. You know, especially if you're a person of means.
Yeah.
I feel like he just mentioned, there are 25 soldiers per individual. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like this information is often skewed by the media, maybe possibly by Pakistan
Oh, yeah.
or any other entity, is as a way to, you know, control Kashmir. Like as I mentioned before.
This was Al Jazeera.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think people fail to realize that the actual safety of the Kashmiris is really highly dependent on this military. Like, the military is doing most of their efforts is gone to protect these people rather than to persecute them. And if persecution is taking place, it's never for the fun of it. It's almost always because there is there's a possibility that, you know, we suspect that, you know, you're affiliated with some organization who is going to cause harm. You know, so the actual involvement of the Indian military, what they do in Kashmir, it is not intended to be, you know, like we're holding the ground. We're doing it because they are our people and it is our duty to protect them. You know, so I was very lucky, you know, when I found out about this. I was in Mississauga and I managed to meet the son of a military man.
Wow.
And his dad was a military man who used to work in Kashmir.
Wow.
So he gave me some insight and he told me, you know, that living in Kashmir is not an easy life.
It's not easy.
You never really know what you're gonna get into, you know. And with the presence of this military, you know, at least you can have that guarantee that, you know, you might not end up getting shot by a militant, you know. So
And also on a lighter note, I just want to go into the issue where you said the Indian side of Kashmir, sometimes they don't be recognized, something like that. So just on a lighter note, I think I can relate. Our very own Russell Peters, you know, he was experiencing the same thing here.
Was he where?
Like he said, he was Canadian here,
Yeah.
and as soon as he went to India, oh, I'm Canadian, Canadian,
right.
buddy, I'm not Indian. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
The identity crisis, it happens, man.
It happens. Well, but with Russell, you know of Russell. of
Russell
course.
Peters.
Well, everybody knows.
Somebody's gonna get hurt by
Somebody's
today.
gonna get hurt
It's not gonna be me.
I want to make, okay, never mind. With Russell, it's different because he has an identity crisis based on ethnicity.
Yes.
But this is a political
This is
issue.
completely
Absolutely.
different.
This is completely
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
they know they're Muslim, and
Yeah.
you know, most of them are very well aware of their circumstances. It's not an identity crisis, not because, you know, they're trying to figure out where they're from. It's more of a, you know, do we get to decide where we're from? You know, like, I'm sure Russell has the, you know, the advantage of being able to make that independent decision that I would like to be Canadian or I would like to be Indian, or maybe even have the ability to change his citizenship.
There's no
We-
fear factor.
There is no fear factor, you know,
Right.
and over here, in fact, the stakes are much higher. You know, it's less about understanding who you are and more about being able to tell people where you're from.
And also more about what not to say, because it's a situation where they're just afraid of, if they can say anything, this might be it. It's a very scary
If you can say
situation.
anything.
Like by that I mean, like, you've said how there's like military and everything.
That's right.
And you know there's always the Indian side, Pakistani side, and sometimes there are people, I would assume, that they want to please both sides.
Oh no, so in one area there's only one military.
Okay.
Right? So like
But I mean, like, for higher institutions, people like, you know, that go to, like, you know, journalism or, you know, work for the military or the government, you know, for
Right.
working those, what do you call it, connections. And if
Right.
they say one bad thing, it can all go wrong.
well, if you're part of the government,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, that
Absolutely.
applies. But for the
But
ordinary
for the
citizen,
ordinary citizens.
ordinary citizens, okay, so on the Pakistani side of Kashmir, there is no such thing as
Okay.
repression. I can testify to that.
Okay.
And I don't mean that in a subjective manner. I only say that because I've had the privilege of
By
going there.
experience.
By experience, that's
Okay.
right. On the Indian side of Kashmir, however, and you know, this may be arguable,
Okay.
but there are no civilian courts, so all the courts are military courts.
Okay.
And even in those, if some civilian does end up taking their complaints of abuse experienced by the army or the forces present
Mhm.
there, they much of their I believe the figure is as high as 80% or 90% of their reports or complaints that go to these courts are considered or deemed false
Okay.
by the courts.
Okay.
Right. So
Right.
so that's the sort of repression that they're facing.
We can't know that for a fact. Like, yes, it has been, contested many times that the legal system, the legal system or the legal support that Kashmiris get might not be as efficient.
Yep.
However, the circumstances of Kashmir is not like every other city. It's not, it wouldn't be right to compare the legal rights given to, say, someone from maybe a better city, like maybe Delhi or Karachi, or say, and maybe compare it to Kashmir, because, like I said, since it is a country which is, got a high involvement of the military, then the way justice works and the way things are determined are slightly different. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that the people aren't getting what they deserve. So, like, when the military reserves the right to put you in a camp, a refugee camp or in prison camp, if they find evidence that you're part of that you're involved with militants, or you're a potential danger to society, and being criticizing the army and saying that no, you can't have that right, it to an extent, if we start doing that, then there will be no power left. We will not able to maintain any kind of stability.
I mean, every country has a right to military.
Within volatile regions,
Right.
the army needs to be given some extra amount of power. But we also have to remember, fair points made, by the way, I completely understand. But we also have to remember that this is a region where the army is given complete immunity from whatever acts they may commit.
Okay.
And this isn't we're not speaking of necessarily the actions that the army has to take with regards to some suspects they might encounter, but we're talking about the complaints that regular civilians like you, I, or Rhythm who go to the army and the military courts. So 80% or 90% of their complaints are deemed false. That was.
By the way, I mean, just broadly speaking, I'm not sure of how the Indian and Pakistani government works, but like in Myanmar, I know that it's the military. It's like separate, and how in the United States, the military and the government, it's like one big thing. If the president says an executive order, then the military listens to him. So, what is it like in India, Pakistan? Is the military, the government separate? Is the military acting on their own, or?
So within Pakistan, it's very interesting because I love this question because this question also answers why Pakistan has experienced so many coups in comparison with India.
Right.
Because the Pakistani structure goes like this. They have one head of the army who's called the chief of the armed forces.
Okay.
And under him is the Navy, and under him is also the Air Force. But India doesn't have that structure. India has a separate head for the Army, a separate head for the Air Force.
Everything's separate.
And for the Army.
Okay.
So there is no singular person commanding the Indian forces. There are 3 separate heads.
Okay.
And then I believe Rhythm would obviously know better that those 3 separate heads report to the Prime Minister most likely.
Okay. And just another question. I have several. Okay, I'll go one by one. We're living in a world where I think people are awoke, like especially
Woke. Did you just use that word?
Woke.
Woke.
We're all woke right now.
We're woke.
Yeah, but especially like the 2016 American election, where people were like, hey, anything is possible. If he can win the election, I can do anything. I can win the Nobel Prize.
Right.
But my point is people are saying things like, oh, fake news, that. People are, sick and tired of this and that. They're calling on higher institutions. So my question to you guys is there ever a chance for unity for the Pakistan Kashmir and the Indian Kashmir? What can be done?
I think I will let you answer.
No. I will. This is unity right here.
Yes.
you will go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. So I believe that there are 2 ways of looking at the situation. We can be. I believe that in this situation, looking at the politics is really important, and I like acknowledging the fact that Kashmir is very resourceful and it's at a strategic military point, making it a more desirable piece of land,
Right.
So there's a reason why, all these countries, like Kashmir, Pakistan, China to an extent, are after this, So if we are going to look for a solution, then this is completely my opinion, not necessarily my country's
Absolutely.
stance, but I believe that if Kashmir had the resources to be independent, then they would be. The way Bangladesh and Sri Lanka were able to say that we're not happy with our situation, we'd like to separate ourselves and be independent entities. And because they had the armies and because they had the resources and a leader to be able to push this was made possible.
And also the right relations.
Absolutely. Kashmir is too small and the population isn't big enough for them to be able to stand up for themselves. So even if we allow them to be independent, I worry if they'd be able to, be a successful country without, being subject to a takeover or without being subject to, some big foreign entity like the States or Europe maybe investing in them for their own selfish interests. Like Kashmir needs to be strong and Kashmir needs to be able to stand on its own feet. India as a whole doesn't necessarily believe that that's possible, so of course now you might disagree, but India's stance would be that if they could raise their hands and say, we're fine being part of India, we embrace it, then the government can take better care of these people. They can invest more. They can make Kashmir say a little bit more, make it a better place to live, the way they've done with other cities. Because India seems to be developing every day. This is something we discuss in economics all the time, that India is one of the countries that's growing at a really fast rate. And there's a reason why that's happening. We are investing a lot, And if the Kashmiri civilians, maybe decided to, put their hands up and make peace with us and saying that we're not going to resist you anymore, then the potential of Kashmir could really reach its high point. And vice versa. I'm not supposed to say this, but if they raise their hands and say, let us be part of Pakistan, then maybe they'll have a country to take care of them, to accept them. Because Kashmir being independent, while idealistic, while looks like an idea that would be in the best interest of Kashmiris, from an economic standpoint, I don't know if they'll be able to survive.
Okay. And also the fact that you were talking about military coups. So, just speaking for me, is it the other problem that, let's say, hypothetically speaking, they become their own independent country and whatnot, and then because it's such a small country, they would be vulnerable to
military
attacks? Is it like that?
Yes, absolutely. India and Pakistan have fought about this for there've been 2 wars, there've been several conflicts, there have been conflicts between China and India regarding Kashmir, as he mentioned before, a part of Kashmir actually belongs to China, because the thing is, it isn't a military standpoint with their mountains. Anyone who has control over Kashmir and decides to attack, they will have an advantage from the height, and Kashmir has abundant resources, so I feel like if Kashmir was independent and they don't have a strong military and government to protect them, then there is a really high possibility that, that Pakistan or China or even India decides that, they're too good to be alone and they're weak. We know they can't defend themselves. Who's to stop us from, taking over them?
It is interesting, however, that we're concerned for the militarization of the Kashmiri region, but right now, that is exactly what's happening. That Kashmir is a highly militarized zone.
Highly militarized.
Right.
Okay.
So it's interesting. Can we be concerned about Kashmir being militarized, and that's why we don't give it independence?
Okay.
While it is militarized right now.
And what about again, bring it back to Taiwan? There's certain countries that recognize it,
Right.
and certain countries that doesn't. So, what about Kashmir in terms of the alliances? How many countries favor and again India, Pakistan,
right?
In the future,
right?
So
the United Nations views Kashmir as a disputed territory. So I know Google Maps likes to add all of Kashmir to India.
Yes,
that's a thing. That's a thing. But
happens.
Nevertheless, legally, the United Nations does view all of Kashmir as a disputed territory.
Okay.
So I think that speaks for the will of the majority of the nations around the world.
And by the way, I've done some research. In Pakistan, I believe there's a group called the Kalash.
Kalash.
The
they
indigenous
are people who live in the Kashmiri areas nearby.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's right.
Because I've heard the Kalash people, they're like their own, they're Alexander the Great's people, and their culture is being threatened.
That's right.
So again, and you said they're part of Kashmir too?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so how would that play into the equation?
Well, they are on the Pakistani side, so that doesn't primarily isn't concerned with the conflict, because the conflict itself is fair enough, right?
Okay.
The conflict itself is taking place on the Indian side.
So this is on Pakistan.
This is in Pakistan.
Okay.
So the Kalash people, if you do wish to talk about them,
right.
yeah, they do exist, and they are facing problems because they do not adhere to the religion that the state of
dominant
Pakistan
religion.
the dominant religion, right?
Right.
So they're, and not only religion, but they're also very socially different from the Pakistani people. So that puts them in a jeopardized situation.
Okay.
Right.
Makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. It's enlightening for me. I apologize. That is
Red light.
Garam cha, man.
I genuinely apologize. That is not the term I meant to use. You see,
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You're free.
This is the term
I
that
am
we've
only
been brought
kidding.
up with. In my country, if we want to refer to the Kashmir, which belongs to Pakistan, we are taught. It's in our history textbooks actually. The letters POK. You know that we're meant to refer to them because when we say Kashmir, we don't even say Indian occupied Kashmir or India's Kashmir. Like we like to say as if Kashmir belongs to us, and then there's POK, which is this undisputed territory which Pakistan is taken away from. I don't agree. However, that is how we've been taught. It comes to my mouth without me even
No,
realizing.
I understand. I was just kidding.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Yeah.
Go on, one second.
So I did not know much about how things worked in that area. You know, unless you told me just now that things are actually better. That
Right.
when I did my research about how life exists in that area of Kashmir, then I noticed that it wasn't actually as rosy as as I would have hoped. But from what I understand, if I'm a Kashmiri and I wanted to choose between living in Pakistan's Kashmir or India's Kashmir, then I might be slightly a better life to live in Pakistan's Kashmir, but it's not much of a leap. Life is still hard. Because
They're very similar countries after all.
It's a very disputed area. So I wouldn't make an argument that because the Kashmir in Pakistan is slightly better, that might mean that Kashmir would be happier with Pakistan. Now this in no means ways that they'd probably be happier with India. I can't say that. But if that argument is made, and it is made quite often by Indian media, Pakistani media, international media actually, then I would like to say that we should not decide what would make Kashmiris happy because I don't believe they've actually seen what a good life can be. Most of them have grown up in an environment in which they do not know what it's like to have a stable home, have access to electricity and internet, have a good quality education, have a job. These are factors which they do not know exist. They haven't experienced. So we don't get to decide that this will make them happy because we don't even know what would make them happy. They've never seen it. So if we were in the long run to discuss, what would make Kashmiris happy, then I think we need to first decide what kind of resources can be made available for them. What can they see before they can make any kind of decisions? Because I think for them at this point, I saw this documentary that broke my heart. Just a few Kashmiri kids. For them, being able to go to school, like 5 days in a week, non-stop, and being able to laugh and smile, that's happiness for them. Like not having to stay at home stuck because of a curfew. Because these things happen, and that is how low it has gotten. That kids, are struggling to go to school and meet their friends. So if we're going to discuss this and we're going to decide who will they be happier with, I feel like they'd be happier in a country which can fund them. And the reason why I said that they'd probably be happier with India is because when it comes to like resources and money, I feel like India would be willing to invest, and I'm sure Pakistan would be as much willing to invest in them. If they're willing to for lack of better term, surrender. Because how much can we really do if you don't want to be helped? You can't force someone. We want to help you. No, we're gonna make buildings for you. We're gonna make schools for you. If people don't want that and they keep rebelling and they keep going on riots, and they keep supporting other parties, then Kashmiris aren't gonna get the help they need.
So I just want to hear from you guys. In terms of Kashmir being independent or not independent, what do you guys like? What are you guys' stance on that?
Isn't that what the whole talk is about?
I thought I just answered that.
Yeah.
I'm going to completely blank.
Well,
yeah.
Please, you talk.
This is how we're dealing with the issue. Okay, so whether or not they should be independent, like I said from the start, I think we should follow the mandate that the United Nations Security Council has given us. And we should really work towards having a plebiscite take place.
And the reason why I bring that up is because, me as a Bangladesh person, we had a similar problem. 1969, 1970, we wanted to be our own country. And
that's cute.
Yeah, man. the big brother talking to the children. Yeah, but what was like the key ingredients? You know the thing in Powerpuff Girls you're saying the sugar, spice,
And everything
ingredients.
nice.
So like, I mean, for us, like the key ingredients, like we had like a revolutionary leader giving like all these speeches and whatnot.
Right.
And we had like a government, and we had someone representing East Pakistan, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
That's right.
Against,
That's right.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So what I'm saying is, has there been any similar instances where, has there been any revolutionary inspirational people?
There have been. I can probably name. I believe his name is Sheikh Yassin.
Sheikh Yassin.
And then there's this other one. I forget his name, but Ali something. I'm so sorry.
I
can't seem
believe
to
one of
remember.
them was actually killed by the Indian army, which actually led to some serious riots in Kashmir. In fact, the Indian government likes to refer to these individuals as militants. Almost terrorists. I don't believe the word terrorist is used, but militants is a more commonly used word. And I think this actually, if I'm not wrong, hurt the sentiments of the local Kashmiris who maybe necessarily believed in these people. So yeah, but I think the Indian government, or the Indian military more like, had evidence that these people were actually propagating violence. That the way they were getting their way is by giving young children guns. By like they're following the people who they're followers were actually really young. 18, 16-year-old children, boys, and these people were recruited from school, saying, do you want independent Kashmir? Come with us, and then these young kids would be taken from school, given guns, like put in military camps.
They're basically manipulated. They're
Almost.
kids.
I totally agree. I totally agree with them, and especially her earlier point that she made when she said these people don't have jobs, they don't have an education, and they don't have a very bright future to look forward to. They're not privileged that way, right? They don't live the normal lives that we do.
It's like nature versus nature. They're not raised.
I suppose so. And so if you are a Kashmiri citizen,
Right.
and you get up every day in the morning and you see nothing but despair. You don't have a job to go to. You don't have a school to go to. You're not engaging in anything productive. All you know, all that you have known your entire life is that there are these forces that are in supposedly what is your homeland, and that you want them out, right? And so then you would obviously be a prime candidate to be chosen by one of these organizations that allegedly promote violence, right? And so you end up as a supposed militant, working against the occupancy.
Because they've
I use the word
influence.
occupancy because that's their
Right.
view, right?
Right.
Of India within Kashmir.
Right. And it's one thing to be like often told all these stories, and it's one thing to actually experience what's going on, like actually going there,
Right.
which you guys have had the fortune of going.
I haven't been to Indian Kashmir.
Oh, okay.
Indian administered Kashmir, not occupied. I wouldn't dare say.
I haven't had the privilege
Okay.
either. I've wanted to go for the longest of time,
Okay.
but I haven't been able to.
Are there any
because-
travel restrictions or anything like that?
No, I can't speak for how it works for Pakistanis,
Okay.
but in India there is actually a very legitimate way to be. If you can travel to Chandigarh,
Okay.
and from Chandigarh there are trains, buses, from car. There are available routes. I think the only issue with me was that going to Kashmir never proved safe enough. There's only
Okay.
so much safety that can be guaranteed. But my family was never convinced that we could be guaranteed 100% safety. And seeing a really beautiful location at that time wasn't worth, potentially risking your lives. At least for my family at the time, So, yes, and every time we wanted to go was usually when the situations were slightly more hostile than usual. But yeah, I've heard it's absolutely beautiful. Like I think some of the most beautiful locations in India belong to Kashmir.
Okay.
So I mean, it used to be a thriving tourist location. Like I think tourism was big. And when the Mughal Empire was
What
big in
else?
India, then the emperor who used to rule Kashmir used to be so proud of the fact that he used to call it Jannat, heaven. So it is a beautiful environment. It happens to have a really hostile nature at the same time.
And by the way, because Kashmir, there's an Indian side, there's a Pakistan side. Is there any territories or any
That is unclaimed?
place that they're like right in between the border,
Yeah, the line of control.
the line of
Yeah, you don't want to step in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're thinking of a vacation spot, that is not
Yeah.
the place to go to.
That's a big
It is
no-no.
okay. So like what I hear is, and this is pretty credible.
Yep.
That spot, the line of control that you're speaking of, right in between the Pakistani and the Indian Kashmir, it is so highly militarized, and I believe it is the longest disputed border in the world, and it is the only border that can be seen from, or not the only, but it can be seen from space.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that big.
Yeah,
Bigger
it
than the Great
is.
Wall of China?
I think that's a myth. I think the Great Wall of China being able to be seen from space is a myth.
Go on.
No, I'm agreeing with him. It is the most militarized, location potentially in the world.
Okay.
Because I feel like safety measures is because if potentially, touch wood, that's not the case. If war were to happen, and it would be the most strategic way to enter India or enter Pakistan from that particular area.
From
If
that
you
area.
look at the map,
Right.
then it would be then entering India from that location, or entering Pakistan from that location, would be the easiest and the most clever way to go. Which is possibly why, since both countries and the governments are in so much fear that we don't want conflict, that is why it is militarized so much. To avoid a war being sprung out. Now, I don't think an actual war will happen. Like a plain war, like in the past. But that fear will always be there.
That's right, man.
Yeah, touch
Not
wood.
gonna-
Listen. Whether or not we may, as Pakistanis, have electricity in our homes, we're sure to keep that line of control lit, 100%. That's why.
It's important.
Yeah. But by the way, I don't know about you guys, but when I visited Bangladesh, the electricity was like terrible. Like after 5 minutes, the
Yeah,
electricity
listen.
was gone.
If you want to talk about that, we're gonna have to do another episode.
But just when you were visited, like how was the electricity or?
It is okay in Kashmir.
Yeah.
So I think in Kashmir it was a lot better than the rest of the. I actually don't remember much, but since the entire memory of Kashmir is very pleasant, so I might be associating that with more electricity.
Right.
But in Pakistan overall, the condition with electricity is pretty bad. So I think it's great in India though.
It is. It depends, I guess. I mean, the better cities, the more cosmopolitan cities, I feel, have much better access to electricity. Like since I lived in Mumbai, I'm a city girl. I have never actually faced any electricity problems. But I am aware that in other cities in India, maybe the more smaller cities, the villages, then electricity is a very genuine issue.
Yeah.
Especially in North India side, with the nearer it is to Kashmir, actually, ironically, in the Punjab side, then electricity is a real issue. It goes every 5 minutes. Exactly.
And also just quickly from the Indian and Pakistani Kashmir, which one receives the most snow? Like just climately speaking.
No.
Like which one? Like is it
Snow.
any difference of climate? What were you thinking?
Well, I wish my major was like environmental science, but it used to be in first year. I switched. I don't have the answer to that actually, but I
Okay.
believe both regions would
to be continued.
they're both beautiful, man.
Yeah.
That's
They're
really it.
absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful, and the weather in them they both receive really intense winters. But I don't think that the fact that there's a border between them changes that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So any closing? We have 4 minutes left to go. Any closing statements?
I would like to say I am so glad that ISA and PSA agreed to do this because this was enlightening almost. I feel like I learned so much.
And you
That's
forgot
right.
about the third Chota player, man. ISA,
And
PSA,
Fusion Radio,
and
of course.
UTSC Entertainment Tech Daily.
That's right.
Of
That's
course.
right. Our Bangladesh represent.
We bring the humor, the birani.
No, honestly,
We forgot the raita, man. We forgot about that.
Well, we
Of
will
all
bring
things.
more than the raita the next time. We'll bring like a whole thali, right?
Yeah.
No, honestly, man, thank you so much
No worries,
for
man.
hosting us,
Yes.
and thank you for
And
being
we
so
hope
open.
that this is the first of many shows. We will
I
do.
hope so. I mean,
Yeah, we
if-
can do this
if-
again.
Yeah, we can.
No fight- no fights have happened,
Listen,
so that's
listen.
good.
We've been doing this for 70 years. I think
Yeah.
we can do another episode.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So just as a closing remark, I've been wanting to say this since the start of the show, but since
Yeah.
that wasn't appropriate, because somebody was in a hurry to start the show. No, I would like to thank the ISA deeply, genuinely, for being open to this idea, and for coming here and supporting the cause. And it isn't about India or Pakistan. It's about getting the message out there. And we're not looking to rile people up, and we're not looking to start conflicts. That's exactly what we're here for, to resolve a conflict. Right.
Go on.
Yeah, I think the point of this was enlightenment, and I was I was slightly nervous when I first met him. I was hoping that this wouldn't lead to any arguments, but this led to more of us getting to know the perspectives of each
Yeah.
country, which is really what should happen. If only the UN was like this, just two an Indian Pakistani representative just being able to talk calmly, it
Yeah.
would solve so much.
Yeah, and just I would like to add because I think when people think of, as I've said earlier, even we had this show last week. When people think of politics, they think of gladiator-style football match and shouting and screaming. So I'd like to thank you guys, for having a constructive dialogue and raising awareness of this important issue. And so to all our viewers listening, this is an important issue. And, if this issue affects you, then, we encourage you guys to do something, take action, change the world. You guys have the power. The power is to the people.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having
Yes.
us.
Thank you.
Yes. So this is your host DJ Rascoon. Catch us with a different flavor next week. Signing off, and here's our other special guests with their marks.
Well, thank you so much for having us, Razvan.
No problem.
And thank you so much for being here with him.
Yes, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Happy-
If you guys
That's
are
right.
watching this, then I hope you guys are having a really good dinner with
Think
us.
of this as a Desi Thanksgiving, the Indian, Pakistan, and Bangladesh.
With the writer.
With the writer, yes.
That's right.
All right, have a good one.
Which one's the right one? Which one's the left? Doesn't matter.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been hearing that music and you're just like, what is going on? Well, you're not long. For today, we're gonna do something completely different. We're gonna bring some masala to the house, some biryani, and we're gonna add some different various flavors. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are with association with TSA. We're doing a special topic. We're doing the topic of Kashmir.
That's right.
Very, very controversial topic. And there's going to be some humor, there's going to be some laughs, there's going to be some seriousness, there's going to be a bit of everything. So without that out of the way, let's go straight to the nitty gritty. So, this guy, this child, he's very confused, he doesn't know if he's Indian or Pakistani. I don't know anything. So just, this is my first time learning, so brief me on this issue. Why is this issue so important for the world?
Okay, who would you like to be briefed
I would
by?
like, in the Indian perspective, the Pakistani
Right, okay,
both
so I
perspectives.
think, first of all, the audience want to know who they're hearing from.
Oh, right.
Right.
This is our third time. Okay.
Listen,
Good job, good job.
if we have
Yes.
brokers like this,
This is, again.
this conflict will never get resolved.